Let's go back to 1850, and a judge has to make a decision. And the judge picks this choice, he gets paid $5, and a judge picks this choice and he gets paid $10. Which way do you think that probably went in 1850? That was a lot of money back then. Well, it turns out that the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 put judges in this very position. There's a lot of controversy, of course, about slavery in the 1840s and into the 1850s, and of course the Civil War starts in 1861. We had a president, Zachary Taylor. But when Zachary Taylor died, the man who filled his place was a New Yorker named Millard Fillmore. And most of you have not heard much about him. And there's a couple things to say about him, but I'm just going to be quick about the Fugitive Slave Act. He's the one who passed that act in September of 1850, and he basically put teeth in the old Fugitive Slave Act that said, hey, if a slave runs away, the South is allowed to chase him, catch him, bring him back. That was allowed. Well, the two things I really want to say about this, outside of that Millard Fillmore was totally for it and thought anyone who didn't obey it, he actually had a few of them arrested and charged with treason, if you can imagine how crazy that is. But Millard Fillmore's little act that he is the one who actually signed into law because Zachary Taylor died, the Fugitive Slave Act said the South could go after slaves into the North and catch them and bring them back. But here's a couple of facts just to know. There's 150,000 free blacks living in the North. So there were Southerners who went up to catch a slave, couldn't find him, and kidnapped a free black and brought them back into slavery. If you ever want to watch a very, very hard movie, 12 Years a Slave is about this actual happening, which happened more than a few times. But here's the parts that I really struggle with. When a slave is kidnapped back and brought back, sometimes they brought free people from the North, and those people were not allowed to testify on their behalf. In other words, hey, I have a wife named such and such, a kid named such and such, and I live on this street in Baltimore. They weren't allowed to say anything. So the captives, the kidnapped free blacks, were not allowed to testify, so therefore oftentimes they were stuck, and there was nothing they could do. And very rarely did the people up north figure out what happened and go down in the South because they didn't know necessarily what plantation to go to or anything. So sometimes people were just kidnapped and they were gone. 12 Years a Slave, a very tough movie that depicts this. But the other part that's frustrating is even though that person couldn't testify, if there was some other people to testify that, hey, that isn't the person, or this person was actually a freed person, if we had white people testify, the judge had to make the final decision. And the judge got paid depending on what he said. If he gave the slave to the master, he got a $10 bill. If he let the slave go, he got $5. So there was actually an incentive financially to favor the master. So you can appreciate how mad the North got about this law because it was kind of intrusive. They were grabbing people, sometimes people who were servants or workers for other businesses up north that were simply kidnapped and taken in the South. And some slaves were actually caught and actually brought back too. That happened too. But a lot of freed blacks were kidnapped. And in the end, whether you like this or not, in 1852, a book came out in the North called Uncle Tom's Cabin. And when the North read that, and when the North read the stories about some of these kidnappings, that made the animosity towards slavery harsher, meaner. And so you started to see the divisiveness of slavery in the 1850s that would lead to the Civil War in 1861.